Some stories come to us when we need them most. This is a tale for those who have walked long roads not always by choice, but by necessity. For mothers who have carried more than their arms could hold. For fathers who learned that true strength lies not in fists, but in staying. For anyone who has stood at the edge of giving up, only to find that mercy sometimes arrives on horseback, wearing dusty boots and asking no questions. The prairie has always been a place of testing. It strips away pretense and reveals what remains when everything else is gone. What remains, more often than not, is love, stubborn, quiet, persistent love. This story is set in the 1880s American West, but its heart beats in any age where one human being chooses to see another. I hope it brings you comfort, the way a warm kitchen and a familiar voice once brought comfort to me. The child stopped walking first. Clara felt the tug on her hand before she understood what it meant. Samuel's small fingers, still wrapped around her own, had gone slack. His feet bare now. The shoes worn through 3 days past simply stopped moving. She looked down. His face was the color of the dust beneath them. Lips cracked white at the edges. Eyes half closed against the sun that had become their enemy somewhere around the 5th day of walking. "Mama." The word came out dry, barely a whisper. "Mama, I can't." Clara knelt. The motion sent pain shooting up through her calves, her thighs, into the small of her back, where something had been wrong since the morning they left the boarding house in Abilene. She pushed it aside. She had been pushing it aside for 11 days now. "Just a little more," she said. "Just a little more, sweetheart." But the words felt hollow in her mouth. She had said them yesterday. The day before? The day before that? Each time, the little more stretched longer, and the something waiting at the end grew less certain. Miriam stood a few paces ahead, her back to them, 7 years old, and already carrying herself like someone who expected nothing good. She did not turn around when her brother stopped. She simply waited. Her thin shoulders rising and falling with each breath, her eyes fixed on the horizon line. That horizon. Clara had been staring at it for so long, she sometimes forgot there had ever been anything else. Yellow grass stretching to the edge of the world. Sky so blue it hurt to look at. And nothing breaking that flat line except the occasional scrub brush. The occasional hawk circling lazy overhead. No farmhouse chimney sending up smoke. No well with a rope and bucket. No wagon track cutting through the grass. Nothing. Clara reached into the cloth bag hanging from her shoulder. Her fingers found the canteen, the one she had bought from a peddler in Fort Worth 2 years ago. Back when 2 years ago was a lifetime she could not have imagined leaving behind. She shook it, a sound, raw, faint, liquid moving against the tin. She unscrewed the cap and held it to Samuel's lips. "Drink, sweetheart." He drank 2 swallows, 3. Then the canteen was empty, and he looked up at her with eyes that asked a question she could not answer. "Good," she said. "That's good. Can you walk now?" He nodded. A small nod. He was lying. And they both knew it. But some lies were necessary for survival. Clara stood. Her knees protested. Her vision swam for a moment before it steadied. She had not drunk anything since yesterday morning, saving every drop for the children. The headache pulsing behind her eyes had become a companion now, familiar as the grief that lived in her chest. Miriam still had not turned around. "Miri?" Clara's voice came out rougher than she intended. "We're moving." The girl nodded once, then started walking again. No questions, no complaints. That silence worried Clara more than tears would have. A child who had stopped asking questions was a child who had stopped hoping for answers. They walked. The sun climbed higher. The grass whispered against Clara's ruined skirt calico fabric that had once been blue with white flowers, now faded to something nameless, torn at the hem where it had caught on mesquite thorns 2 nights back. Clara counted steps. It was something James had taught her years ago, when they first came west on the wagon train. When the walking gets hard, he had said, you count 1 foot, then the other. Don't think about the miles. Just think about the next step. 4:8:47, 4:8:48, 4:8:49. She could still hear his voice when she counted. Could still see his face, the way he smiled at her across the breakfast table. The way he held Samuel when the boy was newborn. The way he looked at her the last morning before the fever took him. 6 months gone now. 6 months. And some days it felt like yesterday. And some days it felt like a lifetime. 4:8:50, 4:8:51. Samuel's hand grew heavier in hers. He was leaning now, his weight pulling at her arm, his feet dragging more than stepping. 4:8:52, 4:8:53. She did not know where they were going. That was the truth she had not spoken aloud. Not to Miriam, not to Samuel, not even to herself in the small hours of the night when she lay awake between her sleeping children, staring up at stars that offered no direction. She had left Abilene because staying meant watching her children starve in a room she could no longer pay for. James had been dead 6 months. The money had lasted 3. The last 3 months had been a slow wearing away. First her wedding ring, pawned for flour and salt pork, then the trunk that held her mother's quilt, sold to a second-hand dealer who gave her half what it was worth, then the coat James had bought her the winter before he died, traded for a week's lodging and a promise from the landlord that he would not put them out until she found work. There was no work. Or rather, there was work she would not do. Work that would have required her to leave her children alone at night. Work that would have cost her something she was not willing to pay. So she had left. West. Someone had told her. Ranches out west always need help. Cooks. Laundresses. A woman with children can find a place if she's willing to work hard. West. She had walked west. The stagecoach cost money she did not have. The wagon trains had already departed for the season. So she walked with 2 children and a cloth bag and a canteen that was now empty and a plan she could not let herself think about directly. A plan. A terrible plan. If she found a farmhouse, if she found people with food, with water, with room, she would ask them to take the children. The thought lived in her chest like a stone, heavy and sharp-edged. She could not look at it straight on, could only circle around it. The way you circle around a wound too deep to touch. Not forever, just until she could find work, earn money, come back for them. That was the lie she told herself. The truth was simpler and worse. She would give them away, because giving them away meant they might live. And keeping them meant watching them die beside her on this endless prairie. A mother's arithmetic? The kind of math no one teaches you. The kind you learn only when everything else has been stripped away. 4,900. 4,901. Miriam stopped. Clara nearly walked into her, so lost in the counting that she had stopped seeing. She blinked, her hand tightening on Samuel's. What? Then she heard it, hoofbeats, distant at first, then growing. A rhythm that did not belong to the wind or the grass or the blood pounding in Clara's ears. She turned. A rider. coming toward them from the east, a dark shape against the brightness of the morning, growing larger with each heartbeat. Clara's body did something it had not done in days. It moved without thought. She stepped in front of her children, pulling Miriam back with her free hand, positioning herself between them and whatever was coming. "Mama?" Samuel's voice, small and frightened. "Hush now." The rider grew closer. A man, she could see now, broad shoulders, a hat pulled low against the sun, a horse that moved with the easy gait of an animal that had been traveling a long time and could travel a long time more. Clara's heart beat hard against her ribs. Out here, a man on horseback could be anything. Help, danger, salvation, ruin. She had no way to know until he was close enough to see the set of his jaw, and by then it might be too late to matter. She had nothing to defend herself with, nothing to offer, nothing to bargain. Only the children behind her, pressed against her back, their breath quick and scared. The rider slowed. 20 paces away, he stopped. For a long moment, nobody moved. The horse stamped once, shaking its big head against the flies. The wind pushed the grass in waves around them. The sun beat down, indifferent to all of it. Clara looked at the man. He was younger than she had first thought. 30, perhaps. A few years older than herself. His face was weathered in the way of men who spent their lives working outdoors, lines around the eyes, skin darkened by years of sun, a jaw that had not seen a razor in several days. But his eyes were steady, not hungry, not calculating, just looking. Taking in the picture before him, a woman in a ruined dress, 2 children half hidden behind her, all of them wearing 11 days of dust and desperation. He did not speak. Neither did Clara. The silence stretched out between them, long as the prairie itself. Then Samuel made a small sound, not quite a whimper, not quite a word, the sound of a body that had reached its limit, and something shifted in the air between them, subtle as a change in the wind. The man's gaze dropped to the children, to Samuel's bare feet, raw and blistered, to Miriam's hollow cheeks, then back to Clara. "How long?" he asked. His voice was low, roughened by dust or disuse or both. Clara's throat tightened. 11 days? A pause. Walking. Yes. Another pause. Longer this time. His eyes moved over her again. Not the way some men looked, not appraising, but something else. Something she could not quite name. "Where are you headed?" The question should have been simple. It was not. Clara opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. "West," she said. It was the only word she had left. The man nodded slowly, as if this were a reasonable answer to an unreasonable situation. Then he did something unexpected. He dismounted. Not quickly, not with any sudden movement that might frighten her. Just swung his leg over the saddle and stepped down, keeping one hand on the horse's neck, keeping his body turned slightly away from her, a posture that said, without words, "I am not a threat." He reached for something hanging from his saddle. Clara tensed, her hand tightening on Miriam's shoulder. A canteen. He unscrewed the cap and held it out toward them. Not toward Clara, toward Samuel, who was peering out from behind her hip. His cracked lips parted. "Boy first," the man said. "Then the girl. Then you, ma'am." Clara did not move. Trust did not come easy anymore. Trust had been buried with James, lowered into the hard Kansas earth, along with everything else she had believed about the world. What remained was caution, suspicion, the hard-learned knowledge that kindness often came with a price. But Samuel was looking at that canteen the way a drowning man looks at a rope. Clara reached out. Her fingers closed around the tin. It was warm from the sun, heavy with water, heavier than anything she had held in days. "Thank you." Her voice cracked on the words. The man said nothing. She knelt, held the canteen to Samuel's lips. Slowly now. Small sips. "You'll make yourself sick if you drink too fast." He drank. Miriam drank. And Clara took one swallow, just enough to wet her throat, then handed the canteen back. The man watched her. His expression did not change. But something moved behind his eyes. Recognition. Perhaps of a particular kind of strength. "There's a ranch," he said. "Half a day's ride from here. Water, food, a roof." Clara's heart lurched against her ribs. "Is there work?" A pause. "Then there could be." She waited, not daring to breathe. "It's my place," he added, almost reluctantly, as if the words cost him something. "I run it alone. Could use someone to cook. Mind the chickens. That sort of thing." Clara stared at him. Her mind, sluggish from thirst and exhaustion and days of walking, struggled to keep pace with what he was offering. A job? A place? Water and food and a roof. It sounded like a trap. It sounded like salvation. She could not tell the difference anymore, and perhaps it did not matter. "Why?" The word came out before she could stop it. "Why would you help us?" The man looked at her for a long moment. Then his gaze shifted to the children, to Samuel, who had slumped against Clara's leg, half asleep already, to Miriam, who was watching the man with the wary stillness of a wild creature deciding whether to run. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. "I've got a horse that can carry the children. You can walk alongside, or—" He paused, and something flickered across his face. Too quick to read. "Or I can lead the horse, and you can ride with them." He had not answered her question. Clara noticed. She filed it away. In the part of her mind that still weighed risks and calculated odds and planned for the worst, but her body was already making the decision her mind had not yet reached. Her knees were bending. Her arms were lifting Samuel. Her voice was saying yes before she fully understood what she was agreeing to. "Thank you," she said again. And then, because the words had been sitting in her chest for 11 days, pressing against her ribs, waiting for someone to hear them, "Just take me home. Anywhere. Just take me home." The man paused, one hand on the horse's bridle. "Home." Clara shook her head. The question was too big, and she was too tired for big questions. "Anywhere," she said. "Anywhere that isn't here. Anywhere my children can sleep under a roof tonight." Something shifted in the man's face. The hard line of his jaw softened, just slightly. His hand moved to his coat pocket, then stopped, as if he had been about to reach for something and thought better of it. "I can do that," he said. He reached down and lifted Samuel with hands that were surprisingly gentle for their roughness. The boy barely stirred as the man settled him into the saddle. Miriam climbed up behind her brother without being asked, her thin arms wrapping around his waist. The man took the horse's lead rope in one hand. He glanced back at Clara. "It's a long walk," he said, "but there'll be supper at the end of it." Then he started walking, leading the horse, and Clara followed. She did not know his name, did not know where they were going, not really, did not know if she had just saved her children or led them into something worse. But she was walking. And for the first time in 11 days, she was not walking alone. The sun began its slow descent toward the horizon. The grass whispered secrets she could not understand. And somewhere ahead, hidden by the curve of the earth, a thin line of smoke rose into the sky. Clara fixed her eyes on that smoke and kept walking. One step, then another, then another. If this story has found you at the right moment, I would be grateful if you would share it with someone who might need it too. Leave a word in the comments about where you are reading from. It is a comfort to know we are not walking this road alone. As my grandmother used to say, a story shared is a burden halved. The horse's hooves struck the hard-packed earth in a rhythm Clara's feet learned to follow. 1 step, 2, 3, 4. The man walked ahead, the lead rope slack in his hand, his stride steady and unhurried. He had not looked back since they started, had not spoken, had not done anything except walk. His boots raising small puffs of dust that drifted back toward Clara and settled on her ruined skirt. She did not mind the dust. She had worn worse these past 11 days. Samuel slept in the saddle. His small body slumped against Miriam's chest. The girl held him with both arms locked around his middle, her fingers laced together over his stomach, her chin resting on the top of his head. Her eyes stayed fixed on the back of the man's hat, watching, waiting. She had not spoken either. None of them had. The sun passed its peak and began the long slide toward the horizon. The grass changed color as they walked yellow to gold to something deeper, almost amber, in the slanting afternoon light. Clara's shadow stretched out beside her, long and thin, a dark twin that moved when she moved and stopped when she stopped. She did not stop. The man's canteen hung from a strap on his saddle, within easy reach. Twice now he had paused without turning around, waited while Clara understood what he meant, then continued walking while she held the canteen to Samuel's lips, then Miriam's. He had not drunk anything himself? Clara noticed. The third time he stopped, her throat was so dry that swallowing hurt. She reached for the canteen, unscrewed the cap, lifted it toward Samuel. "You too, ma'am." The man's voice, behind her now. She had not heard him stop walking. Clara turned. He stood beside the horse's flank, one hand resting on the animal's hindquarters. His face was shadowed beneath the hat brim, but his eyes caught the late afternoon light gray. She thought, or perhaps blue, something in between. "You need water," he said. "Same as them." "I'm fine." The words came out hoarse, rough as sandpaper, unconvincing even to her own ears. The man did not argue. He simply waited, his hand still resting on the horse, his eyes still on her face. Clara drank. The water hit her empty stomach like a fist, and she had to breathe slow through her nose to keep from gagging. She had not realized how hollow she was until the hollowness began to fill. When she lowered the canteen, the man was already walking again. She followed. The questions piled up in her chest like stones. Who was he? Where exactly was this ranch? Why a stranger with nothing to gain would stop for a woman and 2 children in the middle of nowhere? She did not ask any of them. Asking meant answers. And answers meant knowing. And knowing meant deciding whether to trust or run. Clara did not have the strength for either choice right now. So she walked. The sun sank lower. The air cooled against her skin. Somewhere ahead, beyond a gentle rise in the prairie, a thin line of smoke curled up into the evening sky. The man saw it first. His steps slowed just slightly, and his head turned toward that distant gray thread rising against the blue. Clara's pulse quickened. Smoke meant fire. Fire meant people. People meant food and water, and maybe a place to lay her head. But whose fire was it? And what would she find when she reached it? The ranch rose up from the prairie like something dreamed into being. First came the smoke, curling lazy from a stone chimney. Then the outline of a roof low and dark against the fading sky, solid in a way that made Clara's chest ache with wanting. Then walls of rough-hewn timber, weathered to gray by years of wind and sun, standing firm against the flatness all around. A home. Someone's home. The man did not slow as they approached. His boots crunched steady on the hard-packed path that wound between clumps of sagebrush, past a wooden fence post leaning slightly to the left, through a gate that hung open on leather hinges worn soft with age. A dog barked. Clara's hand found Samuel's ankle where it hung against the horse's flank. The boy stirred but did not wake. The barking grew louder, not angry, she realized, but excited, joyful, even. The sound of an animal that had been waiting and was glad the waiting was done. A shape burst from the shadow of the porch. Brown and white, moving fast, tail whipping back and forth so hard the whole back end swayed with it. The man stopped. Biscuit. His voice changed when he said the name. Softer. Warmer. Easy now, girl. We've got company. The dog old, Clara could see now, gray around the muzzle. One ear torn and healed crooked circled the horse once, twice, then stopped at the man's feet with her nose lifted toward the children in the saddle. Miriam's arms tightened around Samuel. She won't hurt you. The man reached down and scratched behind the dog's good ear. Just curious is all. Been a while since she's seen new faces around here. Miriam did not relax. Her eyes moved from the dog to the house to the man and back again, cataloging everything, trusting nothing. Clara recognized that look. She had worn it herself for 11 days straight. The man led them through the yard past a chicken coop where pale shapes shifted and murmured in the growing dark, past a well with a rope and bucket hanging from a wooden frame, past a water trough where the last light of day caught the surface and held it like something precious. Clara stared at that water, her tongue pressed against the roof of her mouth. The man stopped at a hitching post near the porch and looped the lead rope around the worn wood. His hands moved with the ease of long practice, loosening the saddle girth, lifting Samuel down, setting the boy on his feet with a steadiness that surprised her. Samuel swayed. His eyes opened, unfocused, and his mouth shaped a word that did not quite make it out. Inside now. The man's voice was not unkind. There's food on the stove. Clara reached for her son. Samuel's hand found hers, small fingers wrapping tight, holding on, and she pulled him close against her hip. Miriam slid down from the saddle without help, her worn shoes hitting the packed dirt hard. Her jaw set in that way she had when she was determined not to show weakness. The porch steps creaked under Clara's weight. One board was loose, rocking slightly as she stepped over it. The door solid oak, she thought, or something close to it stood half open. And through the gap came a smell that stopped her where she stood. Beans, salt pork, wood smoke, and something else underneath bread, maybe, or cornmeal cooking. Her stomach clenched so hard she nearly bent double. The man pushed the door wide and stepped to one side. Clara hesitated on the threshold. The room beyond was small but solid. A table of rough-hewn pine sat in the center, 4 chairs around it. Only one showing the wear of regular use. Against the far wall, a cast iron stove radiated heat, a pot bubbling gentle on its surface, steam rising toward the ceiling. Shelves lined the wall beside it, tin plates stacked neat, a few cups, jars of something dark that might have been molasses or preserves. A window to the left, no curtains, the glass thick and wavy with age. No pictures on the walls, no cloth on the table, no flowers in a jar, or embroidered samplers, or any of the small touches that spoke of a woman's hand. A man's house, a man who had lived alone for a long time. The man moved past her toward the stove. He lifted the pot's lid, stirred once with a wooden spoon, set the lid back down. Steam rose and curled toward the darkening window. "Sit," he said, without turning around. Clara's legs obeyed before her mind could form an argument. She lowered herself into the nearest chair, pulling Samuel onto her lap. The boy's head dropped heavy against her shoulder. Miriam remained standing. The man ladled beans into a tin bowl, brown and thick, chunks of salt pork floating in the liquid, and set it on the table in front of Clara. A spoon followed, the handle worn smooth from years of use. Then another bowl, smaller, placed beside the first. For the girl. Miriam looked at her mother. Clara nodded. The girl sat. Her hands stayed in her lap, fingers twisted together. Clara lifted the spoon, dipped it into the bowl, brought it to Samuel's lips. The boy's mouth opened, closed, chewed. His eyes stayed shut. "More," he whispered. Clara fed him, spoon after spoon, watching the level in the bowl drop, watching the color slowly return to her son's cheeks. Beside her, Miriam ate carefully, deliberately, as if she expected the food to disappear at any moment. The man stood by the stove, arms crossed over his chest, watching them. His face gave nothing away. When both bowls sat empty, Clara set down the spoon. Her own stomach ached with hunger, but she did not reach for more. Not yet. Not until she understood what all this would cost. "Thank you," she said. The words felt too small for what they meant. The man nodded once. He uncrossed his arms and moved toward a door at the back of the room. A door Clara had not noticed until now, set into the wall beside a stack of firewood. He opened it. Beyond lay a small room, barely larger than a closet, really. A bed with an iron frame. A mattress that looked stuffed with straw. A wool blanket folded neat at the foot. A window, smaller than the one in the main room, letting in the last gray light of evening. "For you," the man said, "and the children." Clara stared at the room, at the bed, at the blanket that someone had folded with care. "Where will you sleep?" The man's gaze moved past her, toward the front door. "Barn's warm enough, but that's not—" Clara stopped herself, started again. "I can't take your bed." Something moved across the man's face. Not quite a smile, but close to it. The first crack in that steady, unreadable expression. "You can, ma'am," he said, "and you will. Morning comes early out here. Best to rest while you're able." He turned and walked toward the front door. The dog Biscuit lifted her head from where she had settled near the stove and watched him go. At the threshold, he paused. "There's water in the basin?" He nodded toward a corner Clara had not noticed, a small table. A ceramic basin, a pitcher beside it. "For the children." "And for yourself." Then he was gone. the door closing soft behind him, the latch clicking into place. Clara sat in the silence of a stranger's house, her son asleep against her chest, her daughter watching her with eyes that asked questions Clara could not answer. The basin. She rose from the chair, carrying Samuel, and crossed to the small table in the corner. The pitcher was full, cool water that caught the lamplight when she lifted it. Beside the pitcher, folded neat, lay a cloth, white cotton, worn soft from years of washing, and beneath the cloth, almost hidden, a small cake of soap. Clara's hands began to shake, not from cold, not from hunger, from something else entirely, something she had not let herself feel in 11 days of walking. She poured water into the basin, dipped the cloth, touched it to Samuel's face. The boy sighed in his sleep. Dirt streaked away from his cheeks, his forehead, the small hollow beneath his eyes, beneath the grime. His skin was pale but whole. Clara washed him. Then Miriam, who stood patient and silent as her mother wiped away the dust of 11 days. Then herself, her hands, her face, the back of her neck where sweat and dirt had dried to a crust. The water in the basin turned brown. The soap smelled of lye and something else lavender. Maybe, faint and surprising. When she finished, Clara stood in the small bedroom with the door pulled shut, her children already curled together on the bed, Miriam's arm draped protective over Samuel's small body. She should sleep. Her body screamed for it, every muscle, every bone, every part of her that had kept moving for 11 days, crying out for rest, but her eyes would not close. The ceiling above her was dark wood, beams running parallel, a single knot in one board that caught the last light from the window and held it. She stared at that knot and let the questions come. Who was this man? Why had he stopped? What did he want from them? The questions circled like crows over a winter field. And beneath them, quieter but more persistent, another question. One she had not allowed herself to ask until now. She had seen it when the man opened the barn door to put the horse away. Just a flash, quick and bright in the lamplight from the house. A wooden box on a shelf, and inside the box, visible for just a moment before the door swung shut, a dress. Small, white cotton with lace at the collar. A child's dress. A little girl's dress. Folded careful and kept in a box in a barn where no children lived. Clara lay in the darkness, her eyes open, her heart beating slow and hard against her ribs. The dress had been about Miriam's size. Clara woke to the sound of a rooster. The crow came sharp through the thin walls, insistent and repeating. Her eyes opened to gray light, not the deep black of midnight, but the soft gray that came just before dawn, when the world hung suspended between one day and the next. She lay still. The mattress beneath her was softer than the hard ground she had slept on for 11 nights. The wool blanket held warmth against her skin, smelling of cedar and something older, mustier, the smell of a chest that had been closed a long time. Samuel's breath came slow and even beside her. His small body curled into the space between her arm and her ribs. His face had lost some of its gray pallor overnight. His lips were no longer cracked white at the edges. Miriam was not in the bed. Clara sat up. The motion sent dull aches through her shoulders, her back, the muscles in her legs that had carried her across the prairie. She pushed the pain aside. Her eyes swept the small room, the iron bed frame, the window pale with early light, the door standing open a crack. The door had been closed when she fell asleep. Clara pushed the blanket aside and swung her feet to the floor. The wood was cold against her bare soles, gritty with dust she had not noticed in the darkness. She crossed to the door, her hand reaching for the rough frame. The main room was not empty. The stove was lit. Heat radiated from its black iron surface, pushing back the chill of early morning. A pot sat on top, steam rising in thin curls toward the ceiling beams. And the smell, Clara's stomach twisted. Cornmeal. Hot cornmeal porridge. Thick and bubbling. The smell of breakfasts from another life. Breakfast she had made in a kitchen with real curtains on the windows, and a husband who came in from morning chores with cold hands and a warm smile. She had not cooked breakfast for anyone in 6 months. The front door opened. Miriam stepped inside. Her thin dress damp at the hem with morning dew. Her arms were wrapped around herself against the chill. But her eyes were brighter than Clara had seen them since before James died. "Mama," the girl's voice was quiet, careful not to wake her brother. "The chickens are making noise." Clara stared at her daughter. "Where were you?" "Outside." Miriam eased the door closed behind her, her small hands lingering on the worn wood. "I heard them clucking. I wanted to see." "You should have woken me. You were sleeping." Miriam's eyes dropped to the floor, studying the grain of the boards. "You never sleep anymore." The words landed somewhere soft in Clara's chest. She opened her mouth to respond, but the sound of boots on the porch stopped her short. The door opened again. The man she still did not know his name stepped inside, ducking his head slightly to clear the frame. His hat was already on, pulled low over his eyes, and his hands were full with something Clara could not immediately make out. A basket, woven from willow branches, the weave tight and even, the handle worn smooth from years of use. Inside the basket, eggs, brown and white and speckled, nestled together on a bed of straw. From the coop, he set the basket on the table, his movements unhurried. "Hens laid good this morning." Clara counted without meaning to. 8 eggs, 9, 10, 11. More than enough for a family. More than enough for 4 people and a dog. The man crossed to the stove, lifted the pot's lid, stirred the porridge with a wooden spoon. Steam rose around his weathered face. "Bowls are on the shelf," he said without turning around. "Spoons in the drawer below." Clara did not move. "I should be doing that." The words came out before she could think better of them. "You said you needed someone to cook." The man's hand paused on the spoon. He stood motionless for a moment, his back to her, his shoulders set in that way men had when they were thinking through something. "Figured you'd need a day," he said at last, "maybe 2, before you start earning your keep." Something in Clara's chest pulled tight. Pride, maybe, or shame. She had trouble telling them apart these days. "I can work." Now he turned. His gray eyes found hers across the room, steady and unreadable in the early light. "I know you can, ma'am." He set the spoon down on the edge of the stove. "But you don't need to. Not this morning." He moved past her toward the door, close enough that she caught the smell of him hay and horse sweat and wood smoke, and underneath it something else. Something clean, boss. Like the lye soap she had used the night before. At the threshold, he stopped. "Chicken coops around the east side of the house. Feeds in the bin just inside the door." He glanced at Miriam, who was watching him with those careful, measuring eyes. "Girl can help you learn where things are, if she's willing." Miriam looked at her mother. Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. "I can show you," Miriam said. Her voice was small but steady, the voice of a child who had learned not to expect too much, but was willing to hope anyway. The man touched the brim of his hat, a small gesture, polite in an old-fashioned way, and stepped outside. The door closed behind him, and Clara listened to his boots crossing the porch, descending the steps, fading into the sounds of the waking ranch. She stood in the kitchen of a stranger's house, the smell of cooking porridge thick in the air, and let herself breathe. Just breathe. For the first time in 11 days, breathing was enough. The morning passed in a rhythm Clara had almost forgotten. She served porridge to the children, scooping it into tin bowls, drizzling molasses from a jar she found on the shelf, watching Samuel eat 3 helpings, while Miriam worked through 2. Then she washed the bowls in the basin, using water she hauled up from the well herself, because she needed to do something with her hands, needed to feel useful again. The well sat 20 paces from the house, its stone rim worn smooth by years of rope and bucket. Clara leaned over the edge and peered down into the darkness. She could hear water cool and clean, moving somewhere far below, and when she lowered the bucket on its pulley, the splash echoed up toward her like a promise. She hauled the bucket up. Her arms burned with the effort, muscles weak from 11 days of walking and not enough food. But the water that spilled over the rim was clear, and when she brought the dipper to her lips, it tasted like nothing she had ever tasted before, like starting over, like being allowed to begin again. By mid-morning, Clara had found the chicken coop. It was a sturdy structure, low walls of weathered wood, wire mesh stretched across the front, a sloped roof to shed the rain. Inside, a dozen hens scratched at the dirt floor, their feathers ruffled, their small eyes bright with curiosity. Miriam stood beside her, one hand resting on the wire. "Mr. Eli showed me how to call them," she said. "Yesterday, when you were sleeping." Clara looked at her daughter. "Mr. Eli." "That's his name. Eli." Miriam shrugged, a small movement of her thin shoulders. "He told me when I asked." Eli. The name settled into Clara's mind, solid and real, not just the man anymore. Eli. "Show me," Clara said. "How to call them?" Miriam cupped her hands around her mouth. Chick, 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 chick. The hens' heads came up, all at once, like flowers turning toward the sun. They moved toward the sound, their clawed feet scratching at the dirt, their soft clucking rising in pitch. Miriam laughed. The sound was so unexpected that Clara felt her throat close around it. Her daughter had not laughed, truly laughed in months, not since before James got sick, not since the world had started falling apart. One piece at a time. "Good," Clara managed. "That's good, sweetheart." She found the feed in a wooden bin near the coop door, cracked corn mixed with millet and wheat, the grains dry and dusty against her palm. She scattered a handful across the ground, and the hens descended, pecking quick and precise, their feathers ruffling as they jostled for position. Clara watched them eat and felt something loosen in her chest. This she knew. This she could do. Her mother had kept chickens in Ohio, back before Clara married, back before she came west with a man she loved and a head full of dreams about the future. The chickens did not care about dreams. They only cared about food and water and a safe place to roost at night. There was comfort in that simplicity. When the hens had eaten their fill, Clara collected the eggs that remained in the nesting boxes, 3 more, warm and smooth against her palm, and carried them back toward the house. Eli was standing by the well. He had not been there when she walked to the coop, but he was there now, the bucket in his hands, water dripping from its rim onto his worn boots. He was watching her. Clara stopped Wan Kwa, the eggs cradled against her chest. "Found the feed?" she said. He nodded. "You'll want to check the boxes twice a day, morning and evening. Hens get broody if you leave the eggs sitting too long." "I know." Something passed across his face, surprise, maybe, or curiosity. It was gone before Clara could be certain. "Where'd you learn that?" Clara looked down at the eggs in her hands. Smooth shells, still warm from the hens that had laid them. "My mother kept chickens. Back in Ohio, when I was a girl, before I married." Eli nodded again, slow and thoughtful. He set the bucket on the well's stone rim and wiped his wet hands on his trousers. "There's more than chickens here," he said. "Cow needs milking twice a day. Garden needs tending. Fence posts need checking after every hard wind." He paused. "It's a lot of work for one person." Clara met his eyes. "I'm not afraid of work, Mr. Eli." The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. "I can see that, ma'am." He held her gaze a moment longer, something unspoken passing between them. Then he turned and walked toward the barn, his boots leaving prints in the dirt that Clara found herself staring at long after he had gone. The afternoon brought warmth and a breeze that smelled of grass and distant rain. Clara worked. She swept the kitchen floor and scrubbed the table with a brush she found beneath the sink. She washed the children's clothes in a tub behind the house, wringing the fabric until her hands ached, hanging the wet garments on a line strung between two posts. She peeled potatoes for supper, her knife moving quick and sure, the skins curling onto the table in long spirals. Samuel helped her carry the potato skins to the pig pen behind the barn, a chore Eli had shown Miriam that first morning, though Clara had not known it until now. Her son walked beside her, his bare feet dusty, his face turned up toward the sky. "Mama." "Yes, sweetheart." "Are we going to live here?" Clara's knife paused on the potato in her hand. She looked at her son, 4 years old. With his father's brown eyes and his father's stubborn chin, and did not know what to say. "For now," she said at last. "We're staying here for now." Samuel nodded, satisfied with the answer. He ran ahead to the pig pen, his thin legs churning, his laughter trailing behind him like a ribbon. Clara watched him go and felt something twist beneath her ribs. For now. Such small words. Such an uncertain promise. But they were all she had to give. Supper was beans again, with potatoes this time, and cornbread Clara had baked herself in the cast-iron skillet she found hanging beside the stove. Eli came in from the barn as the sun was setting, his face dusty, his hands black with axle grease from some repair he had been working on. He washed at the basin without being asked, then sat down at the table across from Clara and the children. They ate in silence. It was not an uncomfortable silence, not the heavy, pressing quiet of strangers with nothing to say. It was the silence of people too tired for words, too hungry to waste breath on conversation. The only sounds were the scrape of spoons against tin, the soft thump of Biscuit's tail against the floor, the creak of the house settling around them. When the food was gone, Clara rose to clear the plates. Eli stopped her with a hand on her arm. "You cooked," he said. "I'll clean?" Clara looked at him, at his weathered face, his calloused fingers, the quiet certainty in his gray eyes. "That's not... It's fair," he said. "You worked hard today, saw you hanging wash, saw you with the chickens." He released her arm and stood, gathering the plates with an ease that spoke of long practice. "Rest now. Morning comes early." Clara sank back into her chair. She watched Eli carry the plates to the basin, watched him pour water from the kettle, watched his hands move through the soap and steam. Behind her, Miriam was teaching Samuel a game with a piece of string cat's cradle. James had called it. One of the few things Clara remembered from her own childhood. The lamp on the table cast long shadows across the walls. Outside, the prairie had gone dark, and the first stars were appearing in the deepening blue. Clara sat in the warmth of a stranger's kitchen, listening to her children play, watching a man wash dishes he did not have to wash, and thought I could stay here. The thought came unbidden, unexpected, terrifying in its simplicity. She pushed it away, but later that night, lying in the small bedroom with Samuel's head on her shoulder and Miriam's hand in hers, Clara heard something that made her go very still. A sound, faint and far away, coming from the direction of the barn. A voice, Eli's voice, low and rough and broken. He was singing. Clara held her breath and listened. The melody was simple, old a song she half remembered from somewhere, though she could not say where. A lullaby. He was singing a lullaby to no one, in a barn where he slept alone, in the dark of a prairie night. And Clara lay awake, her eyes open, her heart aching with a question she could not bring herself to ask. Who had he sung that song to before? 3 days passed before Clara found the box. She had not gone looking for it. She had been looking for a rake. Eli had mentioned one leaning somewhere in the barn, and the chicken coop needed cleaning. The floor thick with droppings and old straw that should have been changed a week ago. The barn was dim in the late afternoon, dusty light slanting through gaps between the wall boards. The horse, a chestnut mare Eli called Penny, stamped in her stall and turned her big head to watch Clara pass, her dark eyes curious and calm. "Easy, girl." Clara kept her voice low, soft. "Just looking for a rake." The rake was not where Eli had said it would be. Clara moved deeper into the barn, past stacked hay bales that smelled of summer, past coils of rope hung neat on wooden pegs, past a workbench cluttered with tools she did not know the names for. The smell of hay and leather and horse sweat filled her nose. Familiar now after 3 days of morning chores and evening feeding. She found the rake in the far corner, leaning against the wall behind a stack of empty feed sacks. She also found the box. It sat on a low shelf, half hidden by a horse blanket draped careless over the edge. Wooden, about the size of a bread loaf, with brass hinges that had gone green with age. Clara's hand stopped on the rake's handle. She should not look. It was not her business. Whatever Eli kept in that box belonged to him alone, and she had no right. The horse blanket slipped. Clara did not touch it. She did not need to. The movement exposed the box's lid, and the lid was not fully closed, a gap of perhaps an inch, dark inside. And through that gap, she saw something white. Fabric, clean and carefully folded. Her fingers left the rake. She crossed to the shelf without deciding to, her feet moving through the scattered straw, her breath going shallow in her chest. The box sat at eye level now. The hinges did not creak when she lifted the lid. A dress. Small. White cotton with a lace collar. The kind of dress a girl might wear to church on Easter Sunday. The fabric was old but well kept, no moth holes, no yellow stains, just clean white cotton that someone had folded with care, tucking the sleeves just so, smoothing the collar flat. Beside the dress, a ribbon, pale blue, faded at the edges where the dye had worn thin, and beneath the ribbon, a lock of hair tied with common string, brown hair, fine and soft. A child's hair. Clara's hand trembled as she touched the fabric. The cotton was cool against her fingertips, smooth with age. Someone had washed it, ironed it, folded it with the kind of attention you gave to things too precious to throw away, but too painful to keep in sight. A shrine. A grave without a body. She lowered the lid. Her throat had gone tight. Her eyes burned, though she would not let the tears come. She had not cried in weeks, not when James died, not when she left Abilene, not when Samuel stopped walking on the prairie and she thought she might have to leave him behind. But now, standing in a stranger's barn with a stranger's grief laid bare before her, something cracked open in her chest. The barn door creaked. Clara spun around, her heart slamming against her ribs, her hand still resting on the closed lid of the box. Eli stood in the doorway, backlit by the afternoon sun. His face was in shadow. She could not see his eyes. Neither of them spoke. The silence stretched out between them, one heartbeat, 2, 3, until the whole barn seemed to hold its breath. Then Eli stepped inside, letting the door swing shut behind him. The light shifted, and Clara could see his face now, the set of his jaw, the hard line of his mouth, the way his gaze moved from her hand on the box to her face and back again. "Found the rake?" Clara said. Her voice came out wrong, too high, too fast, the voice of someone caught where she should not have been. "I see that." He did not move closer, did not raise his voice, just stood there with his hands loose at his sides, his shoulders squared like a man bracing himself for a blow. Clara's fingers slid off the box. I didn't mean to pry." The blanket fell, and I saw, "It's all right." His voice was quiet, flat. The voice of a man who had practiced saying words that cost him nothing because they meant nothing. But his hands were not loose anymore. His fingers had curled into fists at his sides, tight enough that Clara could see the tendons standing out beneath the weathered skin. "Her name was Lily." Clara's breath caught. Eli walked past her, toward the shelf, his boots scuffing through the straw. He stopped beside the box and stood looking down at it, one hand resting on the lid where Clara's hand had been a moment before. She was 3 years old. His thumb traced the edge of the brass hinge, following the curve of tarnished metal. Typhoid fever took her mother too, same week. Clara did not move, did not speak. The air in the barn felt thick, heavy, like something that could be held in your hands if you tried. Sarah was her name. My wife. Eli's hand stilled on the box, his fingers spread flat across the wood. She was the one who kept the house, planted the garden out back, made that dress herself, stayed up 3 nights before Easter to finish the lacework. He fell silent. The horse stamped in her stall. Somewhere outside, a meadowlark called 3 notes, rising, then falling away. Clara found her voice. "How long ago?" 3 years. He did not look at her. 3 years come April. 3 years. 3 years alone in this house, with no curtains, no cloth on the table, no small touches that spoke of a woman's hand. 3 years sleeping in a barn so he did not have to sleep in the bed where his wife had died. 3 years carrying a grief so heavy it had bent him without breaking him. "My husband," Clara said. The words came out quieter than she intended. "James, 6 months now." Eli's head turned. His eyes met hers across the dim space of the barn, and something passed between them, not understanding exactly, but recognition, the acknowledgement of a shared wound. "How?" "Fever." Clara's voice stayed steady. She had told this story before, to landlords and pawnbrokers and anyone who asked why a woman with 2 children was traveling alone. 3 days from the first chill to the last breath. The doctor said it was quick, like that was supposed to be some kind of comfort. Eli nodded slowly. He did not offer condolences, did not say he was sorry, or that it would get easier, or any of the useless things people said when they did not know what else to say. He just nodded. And Clara, for the first time since James had been lowered into that cold Kansas dirt, did not feel quite so alone. The silence that followed was different from the one before. Not heavy, not awkward, just quiet. The way it gets after something true has been spoken and there is nothing left to add. Eli lifted his hand from the box. "The rake's behind you," he said, "if you still need it." Clara turned, psyche. The rake was exactly where she had left it, leaning against the wall, its wooden handle smooth with years of use. "Thank you." She did not know if she was thanking him for the rake or for something larger. She did not think it mattered. She picked up the rake and walked toward the door. "Clara." She stopped, her hand on the rough wooden frame. "That's your name, isn't it?" His voice was still quiet, but there was something different in it now, something warmer. "The boy calls you Mama, but I heard the girl say it once, Clara." She turned. "Yes?" He stood beside the shelf, his hand resting on the box again, his face half in shadow and half in the dusty light from the wall boards. "Eli Mercer," he said. "In case you were wondering." The name settled into the space between them. Real now. Solid. "Mr. Mercer?" Clara said, testing the sound of it. The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. "Just Eli is fine, ma'am." "Then just Clara is fine too." He nodded once. Then he moved past her, toward the door, close enough that she caught the smell of hay on his shirt. The sweat dried on his skin. "Supper's at 6, he said. "I'll bring the milk in." Then he was gone, out into the afternoon light, the barn door swinging shut behind him. Clara stood alone in the dim space, the rake in her hands, the ghost of a dead child's dress still hovering at the edge of her vision. She thought about Lily, 3 years old, brown hair tied with string. She thought about Miriam, 7 years old, eyes too careful, too watchful for a child her age. She thought about the white dress in the box, carefully folded, kept all these years by a man who could not bear to let it go. And she wondered not for the first time, but sharper now. More urgent what it cost him to keep it, what it would cost him to give it away. That night, after the children were asleep, Clara sat on the porch. The air had cooled with the setting sun, and she had wrapped herself in the wool blanket from the bed, the one that smelled of cedar and closed rooms, and something she could not name. The sky above was thick with stars, more than she had ever seen in Ohio, more than she had thought the sky could hold. The barn door was closed. No light showed through the cracks in the boards, but Clara listened anyway. She did not hear the lullaby tonight. She heard nothing, no singing, no movement, no sound at all from the place where Eli slept among the hay bales and the memories of his dead. She pulled the blanket tighter and looked up at the stars. James had taught her the names of the constellations once. On a night like this, before Samuel was born, before Miriam was old enough to remember, he had pointed to the sky and traced the shapes with his finger: Orion, the Dipper, the Great Bear, and she had laughed and said she could not see them, and he had pulled her close and guided her hand until finally, the patterns appeared. She could not remember the names now, only the feeling of his arm around her shoulders, only the sound of his voice in the darkness. Gone. All of it gone. Clara closed her eyes. When she opened them again, Miriam was standing in the doorway. The girl was barefoot, her thin nightgown pale in the starlight, her arms wrapped around herself against the chill. Mama. What is it? Sweetheart? Miriam did not answer right away. She stepped onto the porch, her bare feet silent on the wooden boards, and lowered herself to sit beside Clara on the top step. They sat together in the darkness, mother and daughter, neither one speaking. Then Miriam reached into the pocket of her nightgown and pulled something out. I found this today, she said. In the garden, by the tomato plants. She held it out to Clara, her palm flat, the starlight catching the metal. A ring, gold, thin with wear. The surface scratched and dulled by time. Clara took it. It was light in her hand, lighter than she expected, the metal smooth and cool against her fingers. She turned it toward the light from the window, and she saw the inscription on the inside of the band. Letters worn almost smooth, but still readable if you knew how to look. A date, and beneath the date, two sets of initials intertwined, Imam and Estem, Eli Mercer and Sarah Mercer. A wedding ring. Clara's hands began to shake. It was just lying there, Miriam said. In the dirt, like someone dropped it. Clara stared at the ring in her palm. Like someone dropped it, or like someone buried it. She looked toward the garden, invisible now in the darkness, toward the tomato plants Eli had planted, the rows he had dug and weeded and watered. The ring had been in the dirt, buried in the dirt, but not deep, not so deep that a 7-year-old girl could not find it while pulling weeds. Clara closed her fingers around the ring. Mama, Miriam's voice was uncertain now, worried. Should I give it back to him? Clara did not answer. She was thinking about the box in the barn, the dress, the ribbon, the lock of hair. She was thinking about a man who had buried his wife's wedding ring in the garden where she used to plant tomatoes. And she was thinking about what it meant that the ring was so close to the surface, as if someone had dug it up. Recently, very recently. Clara looked at the barn, at the dark windows, at the closed door, and she wondered what else Eli Mercer had buried in that garden. Clara woke on Sunday with flour on her mind. The ring sat in the pocket of her dress, heavy despite its lightness, pressing against her hip every time she moved. She had not given it back. 3 days now, and she had not found the right moment, or perhaps she had been avoiding the moment, circling around it the way you circle around something you are not ready to face. Today, she decided she would not think about the ring. Today, she would cook. The chicken had been her idea. She had asked Eli 2 days ago if he could spare one of the older hens, the brown one, with the crooked beak that had stopped laying regular, and he had looked at her for a long moment before nodding slow. Sunday, she had said. We'll have a proper Sunday dinner, like folks used to have. He had not argued. Now Clara stood in the kitchen before dawn, the stove already crackling hot, her hands white with flour. The dough for biscuits sat in a wooden bowl, soft and yielding beneath her palms. The chicken plucked and cleaned the evening before, its pale skin pimpled from the cold, waited on a tin plate beside the stove. Samuel slept in the small bedroom, his breath soft and even through the half-open door. Miriam had woken early, as she always did now, and sat at the table watching her mother work with eyes that missed nothing. "Can I help?" Clara looked at her daughter. The girl's hair was tangled from sleep, her nightgown wrinkled, her bare feet cold against the wooden floor, but her face was bright, eager in a way Clara had not seen in months. "You can knead the dough." Miriam slid off the chair and crossed to the counter. Clara stepped aside, making room, and watched as her daughter pressed small hands into the soft mass of flour and lard and buttermilk. "Like this. Harder. Push with your palms, not your fingers. Fold it over, then push again." Miriam pushed. The dough flattened beneath her hands, folded, flattened again. Flour dusted her wrists, her forearms, the front of her nightgown. A small cloud of it rose into the morning light. Clara turned to the chicken. The roasting pan was cast iron, black and heavy, seasoned by years of use until the surface shone like dark water. Clara had found it in the cupboard beneath the stove, buried under a stack of tin plates and a broken ladle, too large for one person. She had thought when she pulled it out. A pan meant for family meals, for Sunday dinners, for a table surrounded by people who loved each other. She rubbed the bird with salt, with pepper, with dried sage from a jar on the shelf. Her fingers worked the seasoning into the skin, pressing it into the grain, tucking the wings beneath the body the way her mother had taught her when she was younger than Miriam was now. The motions were old, familiar, the body remembering what the mind had tried to forget. She had made Sunday dinners for James. Every week without fail, from the first month of their marriage until the last Sunday before he took sick. Chicken, when they could afford it. Pork, when they could not. And always biscuits golden and flaky, steaming when you broke them open. The butter melting into the soft centers. Best meal of the week, he had always said when she set the plate before him. Makes the whole week worth working for. Clara blinked. Her hands had stopped moving on the chicken. "Mama," Miriam's voice. Careful. "You all right?" "Fine." Clara placed the bird in the pan, her movements steady now, controlled. "Just thinking." She did not say about what. The morning passed in kitchen work. Clara peeled potatoes, her knife moving quick and sure, the skins curling onto the table in long spirals that made Samuel laugh when he woke and found them. Miriam collected the peels and carried them out to the pig pen behind the barn, a chore that had become hers without anyone deciding it should be. The chicken went into the oven at 10 o'clock, the pan lid clamped tight to hold in the steam. By noon, the house smelled like Sunday. Clara stood at the counter, mashing potatoes in a large bowl with a wooden paddle, her arms aching from the effort. The butter churned by her own hands 2 days before. The first butter she had made since leaving Ohio melted into the white mass, turning it golden at the edges. The front door opened. Eli stepped inside, ducking beneath the frame the way he always did, his hat in his hand. He had been working the fence line all morning, and his shirt was dark with sweat, his boots caked with mud from the low places where water still stood from last week's rain. He stopped just inside the threshold. Clara watched his face as he took in the scene, the potatoes steaming in the bowl, the chicken browning in the oven, the table set with 4 plates instead of 1. His jaw tightened. His fingers gripped the brim of his hat hard enough to bend the felt. "Smells good," he said. The words came out rough, catching on something in his throat. "It's almost ready." Clara set down the paddle. "You should wash up." He nodded but did not move. His eyes swept the room again, the steam rising from the pots, the children sitting at the table, the cloth Clara had found in a trunk and spread over the rough pine boards. A white cloth, linen, soft with age, embroidered at the edges with small blue flowers in a pattern Clara did not recognize, Sarah's cloth. Clara had known it the moment she unfolded it, had felt the weight of another woman's hands in every careful stitch. But she had used it anyway, because Sunday dinners deserved tablecloths, and because some things were too beautiful to stay folded in the dark. Eli's gaze lingered on the cloth. His throat moved. Then he turned and walked back outside, toward the well. Clara watched him go and said nothing. They ate at 1 o'clock. Clara served the chicken first, carving it with a knife that needed sharpening, laying the pieces on a tin platter that she had polished that morning until it almost shone. The potatoes came next, heaped in a bowl, steam rising thick. Then the biscuits, golden and hot, arranged in a basket lined with a clean dish rag. She sat down last. The table was small, and their knees nearly touched beneath it, Clara's and Eli's on one side, Miriam's and Samuel's on the other. Biscuit lay beneath the table, her tail thumping slow against the floor. Her nose lifted toward the smell of roasted chicken. No one spoke. Clara looked at Eli. He was staring at his plate, his hands flat on the table, his shoulders tight beneath his worn shirt. "Should we say grace?" Miriam's voice, quiet and uncertain. Eli's head came up. He looked at the girl, then at Clara, then back at Miriam. "If you'd like." Miriam nodded. She reached out and took Samuel's hand on one side and Clara's on the other. Her fingers were thin and cold, still rough from the morning's work with the dough. Clara hesitated. Then she extended her hand toward Eli. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he took it. His palm was rough against hers, calloused and warm. His fingers curled around her hand, not tight, but steady, the grip of a man who knew how to hold something without breaking it. Miriam bowed her head. "Thank you for this food," she said. "Thank you for this house. Thank you for—" She paused, as if searching for the right words. "Thank you for Mr. Eli's horse, and his dog, and the chickens, and for bringing us here when we were lost." She stopped. "Amen," Samuel said, though Clara doubted he had been listening. Eli said nothing, but his eyes were closed, his lips pressed together tight, his hand still holding Clara's across the corner of the table. "Amen," Clara said softly. Eli's hand squeezed hers once, then let go. "Eat," Clara said, "before it gets cold." They ate. The chicken was good, moist and tender, the skin crisp from the oven, the meat falling easy from the bone. The potatoes were smooth and rich with butter. The biscuits broke apart in Clara's hands, steam rising from the soft centers. Samuel ate with his fingers, tearing the chicken from the bone, licking grease from his palms. Miriam ate the way she always did, careful and methodical, as if each bite might be her last, as if the food might disappear if she did not pay it proper attention. Eli ate with his head down, his jaw working steady, his eyes fixed on his plate. The silence was not uncomfortable. It was the silence of people too hungry to waste breath on words, too tired to fill the space with talk that meant nothing. Clara found herself settling into it. "The biscuits are good." She looked up. Eli was watching her, a half-eaten biscuit in his hand. Thank you. Sarah used to make them. He paused, his thumb pressing into the soft bread. She could never get them this light, always said she didn't have the touch for it. Clara did not know what to say. Eli set the biscuit down. She would have liked you, I think. The words hung in the air, simple and strange, and heavier than they should have been. I think I would have liked her too, Clara said. Eli nodded. He picked up the biscuit again, took another bite, and did not speak for the rest of the meal. After dinner, Clara washed the dishes. Eli had offered to help, had stood from the table and reached for the empty plates, but Clara had waved him away, sent him outside with the children to check on the animals. She needed the quiet, needed the simple rhythm of soap and water, the feel of warm suds on her hands. The ring was still in her pocket. She had meant to give it back during dinner, had rehearsed the words in her mind while she carved the chicken. Miriam found this in the garden. I thought you should have it. But the moment had never come. And now the ring sat against her hip, small and heavy, waiting. Clara finished the last plate and set it on the shelf. Through the window, she could see the garden, the rows of tomato plants staked neat with wooden poles, the bean vines climbing their supports, the squash spreading its broad leaves across the dark earth. Beyond the garden, the prairie stretched to the horizon, gold and endless under the afternoon sun. She reached into her pocket. The ring was warm from her body, smooth between her fingers. She turned it toward the light, trying to read the inscription inside. The year Eli married Sarah. The year everything began. Clara closed her hand around the ring. She would give it back. Today, before the sun set. She owed him that much. She found him by the fence line, a hammer in his hand, a bucket of nails at his feet. The children were not with him. She had passed them on the way out, playing with Biscuit near the chicken coop, their laughter carrying across the yard like something fragile and precious. Eli did not turn as she approached. He drove a nail into the fence post, the hammer falling in steady strokes, the sound sharp and flat in the still air. Eli. The hammer paused. He turned, his face half shadowed by the brim of his hat, sweat glistening on his forehead in the afternoon heat. Clara held out her hand. The ring sat in her palm, small and gold, and gleaming in the sunlight. Eli looked at it. His face went still. Miriam found it, Clara said, 3 days ago. In the garden, by the tomato plants. He did not move, did not reach for the ring, did not speak. Clara's arm began to ache from holding it out. I thought you should have it back. Eli's eyes lifted from the ring to her face. Something moved behind them, grief, or shock, or something she could not name. I buried it there. Clara's hand faltered. The day she died. His voice was low, rough, as if the words were being dragged up from somewhere deep. I couldn't look at it anymore. Couldn't stand the weight of it on my hand. So I buried it in her garden. Thought the earth would keep it safe, keep it close to her. He reached out slowly and took the ring from her palm. His fingers brushed her skin rough and warm and trembling, just slightly. 3 years, he said. 3 years in the ground. And now it comes back to me. Clara did not know what to say. She stood in the fading light, watching him hold his wife's ring, watching his shoulders bow under the weight of something she could not see. Maybe it was time, she said at last. Eli looked at her. The lines around his eyes seemed deeper now, carved by something more than sun and wind. "Maybe," he said. He slipped the ring into his pocket. His hand stayed there, pressed flat against the fabric, holding it close. "She would have been 7 this year," he said quietly. "Lily, same age as your girl." Clara's chest ached with a pain that was not her own. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Eli shook his head. "Don't be." He picked up the hammer again, tested its weight in his hand. "Just stay. A while longer. If you can." He did not look at her as he said it. He looked at the fence post, at the nail waiting to be driven, at the prairie stretching endless beyond. Clara stood beside him, the wind stirring her hair, the sun warm on her face. "I can," she said. And she meant it. But as she walked back to the house, something nagged at the edge of her mind. A detail she had not thought to question. A piece that did not fit? The garden. Eli had said he buried the ring the day Sarah died. 3 years ago. But Miriam had found it near the surface, barely covered, lying in the dirt as if someone had placed it there only days before. Clara stopped walking. She turned and looked back at the garden, at the rows of vegetables, at the dark earth between them. Eli had said he buried the ring 3 years ago, but the ring had been near the surface, which meant someone had dug it up. Recently. Clara looked at Eli, still standing by the fence, his back to her, the hammer rising and falling in his steady hand. If Eli had buried the ring 3 years ago and the ring was near the surface now, then someone had disturbed it. Someone had dug in that garden, in that exact spot, within the last few days. Clara's hands went cold. Who and why? The sky changed color at noon. Clara noticed it first when she stepped outside to empty the wash water, a yellow tinge at the horizon, spreading upward like a bruise across the blue. The wind had been still all morning, hot and heavy. But now it stirred against her face, pushing grit into her eyes. She set the basin down and shielded her face with her hand. The yellow was darker now, thicker, moving toward them like something alive. "Clara." Eli's voice came sharp from behind her. She turned. He stood at the corner of the house, one hand braced against the weathered boards, his face turned toward the horizon. The color had drained from beneath his sunburned skin. "Get the children inside. Now." Clara did not ask questions. She dropped the basin where it stood, water splashing across her worn shoes, and ran toward the chicken coop. Miriam was there, scattering feed to the hens, her thin dress already whipping in the rising wind. Samuel sat nearby, drawing shapes in the dirt with a stick, his bare feet dusty. "Inside?" Clara's voice came out harder than she meant it to. "Both of you. Right now." Miriam's head came up, her eyes going wide. "But I haven't finished. Now." "Miriam." Something in Clara's face must have told the girl not to argue. She stood, brushed the feed from her hands, and grabbed Samuel's arm. "Come on, Sam, we have to go in." Samuel whined, pulling back. "I don't want to." Clara scooped him up, one arm beneath his legs, her hand pressing his face against her shoulder. He squirmed, kicked, but she held him tight and ran toward the house. The wind was stronger now. It shoved against her back, threw grit into her hair, made her eyes stream with water. She could taste it on her tongue dust, dry earth, the storm that was coming. Eli was at the chicken coop, his arms full of squawking hens, shoving them through the small door into the enclosed run. Biscuit circled his feet, barking at the sky, her hackles raised along her spine. "The shutters!" he shouted over the rising wind. "Close the shutters on the house!" Clara ran. The porch steps were already slick with dust, fine as flour, coating everything it touched. Her foot slipped on the top step, and she stumbled, her knee striking the edge of the porch hard enough to make her gasp. Pain shot up her leg, but she pushed herself up and kept moving. Inside, the house was dim, the windows still open, dust swirling through the rooms in pale clouds. Miriam was already at the nearest window, struggling with the wooden shutter. "Pull harder," Clara said, setting Samuel on the floor. "Grab the latch and pull." "I'm trying." Clara crossed to the window on the far wall. The shutter was stuck warped by years of heat and cold, the wood swollen tight in its frame. She grabbed the edge with both hands and pulled. Nothing. She braced her foot against the wall and pulled again, her shoulders straining, her fingers scraping against rough wood. The shutter groaned, moved an inch, then swung free, nearly hitting her in the face. She slammed it closed, drove the latch home, turned to the next window. "Mama," Miriam's voice, high and frightened. The front door was still open. Through it, Clara could see the yard and the sky beyond. The yellow had become brown, a wall of earth and wind rolling toward them, swallowing the horizon, swallowing the barn, swallowing everything. And Eli was still out there. Clara ran to the door. The wind hit her like a fist. It tore at her clothes, filled her mouth with grit, blinded her with dust so thick she could not see her own hand in front of her face. Eli. Her voice disappeared into the howling. She could barely make him out, a dark shape stumbling toward the house. One arm raised to shield his face, his other hand gripping Biscuit's scruff. The dog was half dragging him, pulling him forward, her legs churning through the dust that was already ankle-deep. "Eli," he heard her, his head turned through the swirling brown. She saw his eyes wide and desperate fixed on her face, 10 feet away, 5. His hand found hers. She pulled. They fell through the door together, a tangle of arms and legs and choking dust. Clara's elbow cracked against the floor. Her hip struck the threshold. She felt Eli's weight on top of her. Then rolling away. Then nothing but the howl of the wind as she kicked the door shut. The latch. She had to get the latch. Her fingers found the metal, slick with dust, and shoved it home. The door shuddered against the frame. The wind screamed outside, pressing against the wood, trying to tear its way in. Clara lay on the floor, her chest heaving, her lungs burning with every breath. The children. Eli's voice, ragged and raw. Clara pushed herself up onto her hands and knees. Dust coated her face, her hair, the inside of her mouth. She spat, tasting earth. "Here." Miriam's voice, small and scared, from the corner near the stove. "We're here. Mama?" Clara crawled toward the sound. Her knee throbbed where she had struck the porch. Her elbow was bleeding. She could feel the wetness, warm against her skin. Samuel was crying, quiet, hiccuping sobs that shook his whole body. Miriam had pulled him into her lap, her arms wrapped tight around his chest, her face pressed into his hair. "It's all right." Clara gathered them both against her, pulling them close, wrapping her body around theirs. It's all right. We're inside. We're safe. But outside, the world was ending. The wind shrieked against the walls. Dust sifted through every crack, every gap, every space between the boards, filling the air with a brown haze that made breathing feel like drowning. The shutters rattled in their frames, straining against the latches. Something struck the roof, a branch, a fence post, something heavy, and the whole house shook. Wet cloths. Eli's voice, behind her. Clara turned. He was on his feet, staggering toward the basin by the stove. His face was caked with dust, his eyes red-rimmed and streaming. Blood ran from a cut on his forehead, tracing a dark line through the brown. "For their faces," he said. "Helps them breathe." Clara pushed herself up. Her legs did not want to hold her. But she made them. She crossed to the basin, grabbed the cloth hanging on the nail beside it, plunged it into the water. The water was already brown. She wrung the cloth out anyway, carried it to the children, pressed it against Samuel's nose and mouth. "Breathe through this," she said. "Slow breaths. That's it. Good boy." Miriam took a cloth from Eli without being asked. She held it to her own face, her dark eyes watching the shutters strain against the wind. Eli handed Clara a third cloth, wet and heavy. "You too," he said. Their fingers touched his coated with dust, hers slick with water. He did not let go immediately. His eyes held hers for a long moment, saying something words could not carry. Then he turned away, toward the door, pressing his own cloth against his face. They sank to the floor. Clara pulled the children against her, her back pressed to the wall beneath the window. Eli sat beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat of his body through the dust that covered them both. Biscuit crawled beneath the table, whimpering. The house shook. The storm did not end. It raged for hours. 1, 2, 3. Clara lost count. Time became meaningless, measured only by the rhythm of Samuel's breath against her chest, by the tremble of Miriam's shoulders beneath her arm, by the steady rasp of Eli's cough beside her. The noise was the worst. Not just the wind, though the wind was terrible. A howling shriek that never stopped, never paused, never gave them a moment of quiet. But beneath the wind, other sounds, the crack of something breaking outside, the rattle of the shutters straining against their hinges, the groan of the house as it fought to stay standing. And once, a thud. Heavy, close, against the wall near Clara's head. She flinched, her arms tightening around the children. "Fence post," Eli said, while his voice muffled by the cloth over his mouth. "Wind's throwing them?" Clara closed her eyes. She could feel the dust in her lungs, now a weight, a thickness, pressing down with every breath. Her throat burned. Her eyes streamed. The cloth over her face had gone dry, the air sucking the moisture from it, leaving it useless. She did not move to wet it again. Moving meant letting go of the children. Moving meant admitting this might not end. So she sat and waited and prayed silently, desperately, words half-formed and formless in her mind, for the wind to stop. Samuel was the first to fall asleep. His body went heavy in Clara's arms, his breathing slow and deep. Dust had settled in his hair, on his eyelashes, in the creases of his small fingers where they gripped her dress. Clara did not wake him. Sleep was better than fear. Miriam followed not long after, her head dropping onto Clara's shoulder, her breath warm against Clara's neck despite the cloth still pressed to her face. That left Clara and Eli. They sat in the darkness the lamp had guttered out an hour ago, starved for air, listening to the storm rage outside. I should check on the animals. Eli's voice was hoarse, scraped raw by dust and coughing. When this ends, Clara said nothing. The chickens might have made it. The coop is solid, and they were inside when it hit. But the horse, he stopped, coughed, deep and wet. Penny was still in the corral. I didn't have time to get her into the barn. Clara's chest tightened. She might have found shelter, Eli said. There's a ravine behind the barn. She knows it. She might have gone there. He was talking to himself as much as to her. Talking to fill the silence. Talking because the alternative was sitting in the dark and thinking about everything that might be lost. Clara understood. The garden, she said. Eli turned his head toward her. She could not see his face in the darkness, but she felt the movement. The tomatoes were almost ripe. Her voice cracked on the words. I was going to make sauce. This week. A sound from beside her. Rough. Broken. Eli was laughing. Tomatoes, he said. I'm thinking about a horse, and you're worrying about tomatoes. Clara felt her own mouth twitch. I was looking forward to that sauce. Were you? I was. The laughter faded. Silence returned. But it was different now. Lighter. As if they had found something in the darkness that made the darkness easier to bear. The wind died at sunset. Clara did not notice at first. The change was gradual, the howling fading to a moan. The moan fading to a whisper, the whisper fading to nothing. Silence. True silence. After hours of noise, Clara's ears rang with it. Eli stirred beside her. It's over. He stood slowly, his joints cracking, his breathing ragged. Clara heard him cross to the door, heard the scrape of the latch, light flooded in gray and thin, the light of a world buried in dust. Clara blinked against it. She could not see clearly. Her eyes were swollen, irritated, gritty with dust that no amount of blinking could clear. But through the blur, she made out shapes. The porch, the yard, the fence line. What was left of them? Stay here. Eli's voice was flat. Keep the children inside. He stepped through the door. Clara laid Miriam gently on the floor, settled Samuel beside her, and followed. The porch was buried. Dust had drifted against the house in waves, piling against the walls, covering the steps, reaching halfway up the doorframe. Clara's feet sank into it as she stepped outside ankle deep, soft and shifting, like walking through loose sand. The yard was worse. The chicken coop leaned to one side, one wall collapsed, the wire mesh torn and hanging loose. The garden had vanished, not damaged, not buried, but gone. The rows of vegetables invisible beneath a blanket of brown earth. The fence was scattered across the prairie, its posts thrown like broken sticks. And the barn, Clara's breath caught. The barn was standing, but its door hung open, torn from its hinges. And inside, she could see Penny. The horse lay on her side in the straw, her legs folded beneath her, her flanks heaving with labored breath. Eli was already kneeling beside her, his hands moving over her body, his face pressed against her dusty mane. Clara stumbled toward them. The dust pulled at her feet with every step. Her skirt was heavy with it, dragging against her legs, trying to hold her back. She fell once, her knee striking something hard beneath the surface, pain lancing through her already bruised leg, and pushed herself up again. She reached the barn. Eli did not look at her. His hands moved over the horse's body, pressing, searching. His jaw was tight, his eyes wet with something that might have been dust and might have been tears. Is she alive? His voice was barely a whisper. Her leg is hurt. Don't know how bad. Clara knelt beside him. The horse's eye rolled toward her, white-rimmed with fear. Her nostrils flared with each shallow breath, her whole body trembling. Clara reached out and touched the horse's neck. The skin was hot beneath her fingers, slick with sweat and grit. Easy, girl, she murmured. Easy now. Penny's head dropped back to the straw. Eli sat back on his heels. His hands hung loose between his knees, coated with dust and horse sweat. His shoulders bowed, his head dropped, his whole body sagging like something broken. I can't lose her too. The words were so quiet Clara almost missed them. She looked at him, at this man who had taken her in, fed her children, given her a place to rest, and saw what the storm had done. Not to the ranch, to him. She was the last thing Sarah touched, he said, his voice cracking. The morning before she got sick, she brushed Penny's mane and told me she was the prettiest horse in the territory. His hands pressed against his face. His shoulders shook. Clara reached out and took his arm. He did not pull away. They knelt there in the ruined barn, the injured horse breathing between them, the dust settling around them like ash after a fire. And Clara thought, this is what it costs. To stay, to care, to let yourself love something that can be taken away. They worked until dark. Clara cleared what she could from the yard while Eli tended to Penny. The horse's leg was bruised, maybe sprained, but not broken. She could put weight on it if she moved slow, could stand with help, could hobble to the water trough when Eli led her there. The chickens had not all survived. Clara found 2 of them dead in the wreckage of the coop, their feathers matted with dust, their small bodies stiff. She carried them behind the barn and dug a hole with her bare hands, the soil loose and easy beneath the dust, her fingers scraping against roots and stones. She buried them without ceremony. When she finished, her hands were black with dirt. Her nails were torn. Her knees were caked with mud from kneeling in the low places where the dust had mixed with moisture to form a thick, brown paste. She looked down at herself, at her ruined dress, her filthy hands, her bare feet black to the ankles, and felt something she had not felt since James died: shame. Not for the dirt, not for the work, for everything, for the woman she had become, for the choices she had made, for the desperation that had driven her across the prairie with 2 children and a prayer and nothing else. She had thought, that first day on the road, that she could not sink any lower. She had been wrong. Clara knelt in the mud behind the barn, her hands buried in the earth that had swallowed 2 dead chickens, and let the tears come. Not quiet tears, not dignified weeping, ugly sobs that tore from her chest like something ripped, sounds she had not let herself make in months of holding everything together, months of being strong, months of putting one foot in front of the other because the children needed her to. She cried for James, for the life they had built and lost, for the woman she had been before everything fell apart. She cried for her children, for the fear in Samuel's eyes when the storm hit, for the careful silence Miriam wore like armor. She cried for Eli, for his dead wife and his dead daughter, and the ring he had buried in the garden, and the horse that might have died today. She cried until there was nothing left. Then she wiped her face with her muddy hands, leaving streaks of dirt across her cheeks, and pushed herself to her feet. The sun was gone. The first stars were appearing in the clearing sky. She walked back to the house. Eli found her on the porch. She had not been able to go inside, had not been able to face the children, not looking like this, covered in mud and dust and the evidence of her breakdown. So she sat on the top step, her ruined dress spreading around her, her dirty hands folded in her lap, and stared at nothing. Eli sat down beside her. He did not speak, did not ask what had happened, did not offer words of comfort or wisdom or hope. He just sat. The silence stretched between them, long and comfortable and full of things that did not need to be said. Finally, Clara spoke. I buried the chickens. I saw. With my hands? I know. She looked down at her fingers, the torn nails, the dirt ground deep into every crease and line, the mud drying to a crust on her palms. I look like something that crawled out of the ground. Eli turned his head toward her. In the fading light, she could see the ghost of a smile at the corner of his mouth. You look like someone who survived. Clara stared at him. The storm, he said. The work, all of it. He reached out and took her hand, her dirty, ruined, mud-caked hand, and held it between both of his. You survived, Clara. That's not something to be ashamed of. Clara's throat tightened. We'll rebuild, Eli said. The coop, the fence, the garden. He squeezed her hand. All of it. We'll rebuild it together. Clara looked at him, at this man she barely knew, this stranger who had become something more, and felt something shift in her chest. Together, she said. He nodded. They sat on the porch, hands clasped, watching the stars appear one by one in the clearing sky. And Clara thought, maybe this is what it means to find home. Not a place, not a roof or walls or a piece of land. A person. Someone who sits with you in the dark and holds your hand and says, we will rebuild. Later that night, after Clara had washed and the children were asleep, she lay awake in the small bedroom, staring at the ceiling. Her body ached. Her hands throbbed. Her lungs still burned from the dust she had breathed. But her mind would not rest. The ring. She had not thought about it during the storm, had not thought about the question that had been circling in her mind for days. But now, in the quiet darkness, it came back to her. Eli had buried the ring 3 years ago. The ring had been found near the surface. Someone had dug it up. Recently, Clara sat up in bed. There was only one person who knew where the ring was buried. One person who would have reason to dig in that spot. And he had done it if her guess was right the night before he found her on the prairie, the night before he brought her and the children home. Clara's heart beat slow and hard against her ribs. What had Eli been doing in that garden? What had he been thinking? And what had made him change his mind? The rider appeared on the 7th morning after the storm. Clara saw him first, a dark shape moving along the ridge where the fence posts used to stand, picking his way careful through the debris scattered across the prairie. She was in the garden, or what remained of it, on her knees in the mud, her fingers working through the ruined soil to find anything that might have survived. 3 tomato plants, 2 squash vines, a single row of beans that had somehow stayed rooted despite the wind. Not much, but something. She sat back on her heels and watched the rider approach. He was an older man, 50, perhaps, or close to 60, with a beard gone gray at the edges, and a hat that had seen better days. His horse was a sturdy bay, moving slow and steady through the broken fence posts and tangled wire that littered the ground. Clara stood. Her dress was filthy from a week of hard work, stained with mud, torn at the hem, the fabric worn thin at the elbows. Her hands were rough and calloused, her nails still black from the chicken burial. Her hair had come loose from its pins and hung in tangled ropes around her face. She did not try to fix any of it. The rider stopped at what had been the edge of the yard. "Morning?" His voice was rough, weathered by years of prairie wind and hard living. "The Mercer place." Clara's throat tightened. Mercer? She still was not fully used to thinking of it that way, as a place that belonged to someone, as a place with a name. "Yes." The man's eyes moved over her, over the ruined garden, the collapsed chicken coop, the barn with its door still hanging crooked on one hinge. His face gave nothing away. "Name's Tom Brewster." He touched the brim of his hat, a gesture of politeness that felt automatic rather than warm. "Got a ranch about 10 miles east of here. Came to check on Eli, see how he fared in the blow." Clara wiped her hands on her skirt, leaving fresh streaks of mud across the fabric. "He's in the barn, working on the horse." Tom Brewster nodded. He did not dismount. "You must be the woman." His voice was flat, not unfriendly. Exactly, but not welcoming either. Measuring. "Heard there was a woman here now. With children." Clara's spine went straight. "Yes." Tom's gaze lingered on her face, traveling down to her mud-caked hands, her ruined dress, the bare feet she had not bothered to cover this morning because her only pair of shoes was still drying by the stove. She knew what he saw. She knew what he was thinking. A woman alone, in a single man's house, with 2 children who were not his. "Eli mentioned how long you'll be staying," Tom asked. The question landed like a stone thrown into still water, breaking the surface, sending ripples outward in every direction. Clara opened her mouth to answer, but the creak of the barn door stopped her. Eli stepped out into the morning light. He looked worse than Clara had ever seen him. The week since the storm had carved new lines into his face, deepened the shadows beneath his eyes to bruises. He had barely slept, Clara knew, because she had heard him moving in the barn at all hours. Heard the low murmur of his voice as he talked to Penny in the darkness, coaxing the injured horse to eat, to stand, to keep living. He stopped when he saw Tom Brewster. "Tom." "Eli." Tom shifted in his saddle, the leather creaking beneath his weight. "Storm hit you pretty hard." "It did." Tom's eyes moved between Eli and Clara. Something flickered in his expression, curiosity, judgment, something that made Clara's stomach tighten. "Lost my north fence line," Tom said. 6 head of cattle scattered to the wind. Found 4 of them in Johnson's ravine yesterday morning, but the other 2... He shrugged, a gesture that held more resignation than grief. "Prairie takes what it wants." Eli nodded. He did not move closer, did not offer coffee or water, or any of the small courtesies Clara had learned were expected between neighbors in this country. Tom noticed. Clara could see it in the way his eyes narrowed, the way his jaw tightened beneath his gray beard. "Brought some news from town." Tom reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a folded newspaper, yellowed at the edges. "Week old now, but figured you might not have seen it." Eli crossed the yard and took the paper from Tom's outstretched hand. His eyes moved across the front page, then flipped to something inside. His face changed. Clara watched the shift, the tightening of his jaw, the way his hand clenched around the paper's edge. Something in those printed words had struck him, though she could not see what. "There's work in Dalton," Tom said. His voice was casual, but his eyes were not. They slid toward Clara as he spoke, watching her reaction. "Article on page 3, new hotel going up on Main Street. They're looking for kitchen help, cooks, laundresses, that sort of thing." He paused. "Might be a good opportunity for someone looking to settle proper." The word hung in the air. Proper. Clara felt the blood rise to her face. Her hands curled into fists at her sides, nails digging into her muddy palms. She knew what Tom Brewster meant. She knew what proper looked like to a man like him, a woman with a husband, a woman with a ring on her finger, a woman who did not live alone in another man's house with 2 children who called her mama and called him nothing at all. "Thank you for the news." Eli's voice was controlled, steady, but Clara heard the edge beneath it. "I'll let you know if we need anything." Tom nodded slowly. His eyes stayed on Clara a moment longer, measuring, assessing, finding her wanting. Then he touched his hat brim again. "Ma'am." He turned his horse and rode back the way he had come, picking his way through the debris, disappearing over the ridge without looking back. Clara stood in the ruined yard, her hands clenched at her sides, her face burning with a shame that had no name, when Tom Brewster had vanished entirely. Eli turned to her. "Don't," Clara blinked. "Don't what? Don't listen to him?" Eli's jaw was tight, his gray eyes hard. "Tom Brewster's been sticking his nose in other people's business since before I could walk. He doesn't know anything about you, doesn't know anything about us." "Us?" The word struck Clara somewhere deep. She had not thought of them as us before, had not let herself think it. "What does the paper say?" she asked. Eli looked down at the newspaper still clutched in his hand. His thumb rubbed across the edge of the page, back and forth, like a man trying to smooth away something rough. "There's a job posting, he said. "In Dalton, like Tom said. Kitchen work at the new hotel, room and board included." Clara's chest tightened. And nothing?" Eli folded the paper, shoved it into his back pocket. "It doesn't matter." He turned and walked back toward the barn. Clara stood in the ruined yard, watching him go, the echo of Tom Brewster's words still ringing in her ears. Might be good for someone looking to settle proper. The word tasted like ashes on her tongue. That night, Clara could not sleep. She lay in the small bedroom, the children pressed warm against her sides, staring at the dark ceiling. The conversation with Tom Brewster played over and over in her mind, his eyes on her face, his voice flat and knowing. The way he had looked at her, like she was something that needed explaining, something shameful. Clara had known women like herself, back in Abilene, widows and unmarried mothers, women who had lost everything and found themselves dependent on the charity of strangers. She had watched them shrink under the weight of other people's judgment, watched them apologize for their existence, watched them disappear into the margins of a world that had no place for them. She had sworn she would never become one of them. But here she was, living in a man's house, wearing a dead woman's apron, letting her children eat at his table and sleep under his roof. What was she, if not exactly what Tom Brewster thought? Clara pressed her hand against her mouth to hold the sound inside. She would not cry. She had cried enough behind the barn, on her knees in the mud, burying dead chickens with her bare hands. She had no tears left, but her chest ached with the effort of holding everything in. Morning came gray and cold. Clara rose before dawn, dressed in the dim light, and slipped out of the bedroom without waking the children. The house was silent. The stove had gone cold overnight, and her breath misted in the air as she crossed to the counter. She did not light the fire. Instead, she stood at the window, looking out at the yard, at the barn, at the prairie stretching endless beyond. Dalton. The name sat in her mind like a stone. A job, room and board, a chance to start over, to build something of her own, to stop being the woman in Eli Mercer's house. She could leave. The thought was sharp, clear, terrible. She could take the children and go, find work in Dalton, rent a room, send Miriam to school, give Samuel a normal life. A life where people did not look at his mother and see something shameful. She could stop being dependent on a man she barely knew. Stop waiting for the other boot to drop. Stop pretending that whatever this was, this fragile, unspoken thing between her and Eli, could last. Clara pressed her forehead against the cold glass. She should go. It was the right thing. The proper thing. The thing that would silence Tom Brewster and everyone like him. But when she closed her eyes, she did not see Dalton. She saw Eli's face in the barn after the storm, his hands gentle on Penny's injured leg. She saw him teaching Samuel how to hold a fishing pole, patient and quiet, his voice soft in the morning light. She saw him sitting beside her on the porch steps, holding her muddy hand, telling her they would rebuild. She saw home. Clara opened her eyes. The barn door was opening. Eli stepped out, a bucket in his hand, his shoulders hunched against the morning chill. He crossed to the well, lowered the bucket, hauled it up. He did not look toward the house. Clara watched him work the economy of his movements, the way he carried the weight without complaint, the steadiness of his hands. He was a good man. She had known it from the first day, even when she had not trusted it. Even when she had looked for the catch, the hidden cost, the thing that would prove her instincts wrong. There was no catch. There was only Eli, alone on a ranch too big for one person, carrying a grief too heavy for one set of shoulders. And there was Clara, alone with 2 children, carrying a weight that matched his. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. She found him in the barn an hour later. He was brushing Penny, long strokes that sent dust motes spinning in the thin morning light. The horse's leg was better. She could stand on it now without trembling. Could walk without limping too badly, but Eli still handled her like she might break. Clara stopped in the doorway. Eli. He did not turn. Morning. I need to talk to you. His hand paused on the horse's flank. He set the brush down on the shelf and turned to face her, his eyes guarded, his jaw tight. About what? Clara stepped into the barn. The smell of hay and horse surrounded her. Familiar now. Almost comforting. About Dalton. Eli's shoulders stiffened. What about it? Tom Brewster thinks I should go. Tom Brewster can mind his own affairs. Maybe. Clara took another step toward him. But he's not wrong. Is he about this? She gestured at the space between them, at the barn, the house, the life they had built without ever discussing it. About me, living here with you? Eli was silent. People will talk, Clara said. They probably already are. A widow with 2 children, staying with a man who's not her husband, in a house with no chaperone. Her voice caught. You know what they'll say. What they'll think. I don't give a damn what they think. You should. Clara's voice rose despite herself. I should. For the children. If nothing else. The children are fine. Eli stepped toward her, close enough now that she could see the pulse beating in his throat. They're fed. They're safe. They're. He stopped, breathed, started again. They laugh, Clara. I hear them laughing. First time I've heard a child laugh in this house in 3 years. When was the last time they laughed before they came here? Clara's throat closed. That's not the point. Then what is... Eli's voice was rough now, scraped raw. What is the point of leaving a place where you're wanted? To go somewhere you'll just be another pair of hands. Clara stared at him. Wanted. The word hung between them. Heavy with meaning neither of them had spoken aloud. Is that what I am? Her voice was barely a whisper. Wanted. Eli's face changed. The guarded look fell away, leaving something raw and exposed beneath. Clara. His voice broke on her name. I buried my wife's ring the night before I found you. I dug it up out of the garden where I'd put it 3 years ago, and I held it in my hand, and I thought... He stopped. Clara waited, not breathing. I thought I was done, he said. Done with all of it. The ranch, the work, the waking up alone every morning in a barn because I can't stand to sleep in the bed where she died. His hands clenched at his sides. I dug up that ring because I was going to leave. Walk away. Let the prairie have this place. Evaluate the way it takes everything else. Clara's heart was pounding now, slow and hard against her ribs. And then I rode out the next morning, Eli continued. And there you were, you and your children, standing in the middle of the grass like something I dreamed up, looking at me like I was the answer to a prayer you'd stopped believing in. He reached out slowly and took her hand. His fingers were rough against her skin, calloused and warm. I don't know what this is, he said. I don't know what we are, but I know I don't want you to go. Not to Dalton, not anywhere. Clara's eyes burned. Eli, stay. His grip tightened on her hand. Not because you have to. Not because there's nowhere else to go. Stay because you want to be here. Stay because... He stopped again, struggling with words that did not come easy. Stay because maybe we both deserve something good. He finished quietly. After everything we've lost. The barn was silent. Only Penny's soft breathing broke the stillness, and the distant call of a meadowlark outside. Clara looked at Eli, at this man who had lost everything and kept going, who had buried his grief in the garden and found it unearthed again, who had taken in a stranger and her children and given them a home without asking anything in return. She thought about Dalton, about Proper, about what people would say, and then she let go of all of it. I'm not going anywhere, she said. Eli's breath caught. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. Not ever, unless you tell me to go. She squeezed his hand. I'm staying, Eli, for as long as you'll have me. Something shifted in his face. The tension around his eyes eased. His mouth curved into something that was almost a smile. That might be a long time. I'm counting on it. They stood there in the dusty barn, hands joined, meeting, the morning light streaming through the gaps in the walls. And Clara thought, this is what it feels like, to choose. To be chosen, to stay. They walked back to the house together. The children were awake. Clara could hear Samuel's voice through the open window, asking Miriam something about breakfast. Smoke rose from the chimney. Someone had lit the stove. Clara stopped at the edge of the porch. Eli. He turned. The ring. She hesitated. Sarah's ring. The one you dug up. What did you do with it? After Eli's hand moved to his pocket, he drew out the small gold band, held it in his palm where the morning light caught it. Been carrying it, he said, since you gave it back. Didn't know what else to do with it. Clara looked at the ring, the worn inscription, the thin gold, the weight of 3 years of grief pressed into something small enough to fit on a finger. Maybe it's time to put it somewhere safe, she said, tomorrow. Somewhere you can find it when you want to remember, but not somewhere you have to carry every day. Eli was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. The box, he said, in the barn, with the dress and the ribbon. Yes. He looked at the ring one more time, turning it in his fingers, watching the light move across the scratched gold surface. Then he slipped it back into his pocket. Tonight, he said, after supper, will you come with me when I put it back? Clara reached out and took his hand. Yes. They climbed the porch steps together, hands still joined. But before they reached the door, the sound of hoofbeats made them both stop. Another rider was coming down the ridge. Not Tom Brewster this time. A woman. Clara squinted against the morning sun, trying to make out the approaching figure. The horse was dark black or very dark brown, and moved with a purpose that suggested the rider knew exactly where she was going. And the woman. The woman was dressed all in black. Black dress, black bonnet, black shawl wrapped around her shoulders despite the warmth of the morning. Clara's stomach dropped. Eli's hand tightened on hers. Who is that? Clara whispered. Eli did not answer, but his face had gone pale beneath the weathered tan, and his eyes were fixed on the approaching figure with an expression Clara had never seen before, recognition, and something that looked very much like fear. The woman in black dismounted before her horse had fully stopped. She was older than Clara had first thought, past 50, perhaps closer to 60, with gray threading through the dark hair pulled back beneath her bonnet. Her face was weathered, lined by years of prairie sun and wind, but her eyes were sharp, moving quickly from Eli to Clara to the joined hands between them. Eli! Her voice was not what Clara expected. Not cold, not harsh, just tired, in a way that went deeper than sleeplessness, deeper than the long ride from wherever she had come. Eli's hand slipped from Clara's. He stepped forward, his body going rigid, his shoulders squaring like a man bracing for something he had long expected but never wanted. Martha. The name meant nothing to Clara, but the way Eli said it, the weight of years pressed into 2 syllables. The careful distance in his voice told her this woman was not a stranger. Martha's gaze moved to Clara. It lingered, taking in the worn dress, the mud-stained hands, the way Clara stood on the porch of a house that was not hers. "You have company." It was not a question. "This is Clara." Eli's voice was careful, measured. "Clara, this is Martha Dawson. She was—" He stopped, swallowed. "She was Sarah's mother." Clara's breath caught in her chest. Sarah's mother. The woman who had lost a daughter and a granddaughter in the same terrible week. The woman whose grief ran as deep as Eli's, measured in the same terrible arithmetic of empty chairs and silenced voices. Clara stepped forward. "Mrs. Dawson." Martha's eyes stayed on her face. Something moved behind them, judgment, perhaps, or curiosity, or something Clara could not name. "You're living here." Still not a question. "I'm working here." Clara kept her voice steady, though her heart was hammering against her ribs. "Cooking, cleaning, tending the animals. With children." "Yes, my children." Martha turned back to Eli. Her jaw was tight beneath the weathered skin, her hands clasped in front of her, knuckles white where they gripped each other. "You didn't write, I know. 3 years, Eli. 3 years, and not a single letter. Not one word to let me know you were still alive." Her voice cracked on the last word. "I had to hear from Tom Brewster. Tom Brewster. Of all people, that you'd survived the winter. That you had a woman living in my daughter's house." Eli's face was pale. His hands hung loose at his sides, but Clara could see the tremor in his fingers. "Martha, I buried my daughter." Martha's voice rose, raw with something that had been held inside too long. "I buried my granddaughter. I stood at their graves and watched them lower those boxes into the ground, and you couldn't even write to tell me you were still breathing." Clara took a step back. This was not her conversation, not her grief. She should go inside. I'd give them privacy, let them say whatever needed to be said between them. But her feet would not move. Eli stood in the yard, his head bowed, his shoulders curved inward. He did not defend himself, did not explain about the grief that had swallowed him whole. The days and weeks and months when getting out of bed had felt like climbing a mountain, did not offer the excuses Clara knew he could give. He just stood there, taking it. Martha's shoulders trembled. Her breath came in short gasps. And Clara realized, with sudden clarity, that the older woman was not angry. She was afraid. Afraid of what she would find here. Afraid of what Eli had become in the years of silence. Afraid that the last connection to her lost daughter had been severed without her knowing. Clara stepped forward. "Mrs. Dawson." Martha's head turned. Her eyes were wet, though no tears had fallen. "I didn't know your daughter." Clara kept her voice soft, careful. "I never met her, never saw her face except in the way Eli talks about her sometimes, when he forgets to guard his words. But I know what she built here. I see it in every room of this house, the garden she planted, the curtains she never got to hang, the way everything is arranged just so. Even after all this time." Martha stared at her. "He hasn't forgotten her," Clara continued. "He could never forget her. He carries her with him every single day, in ways I'm only beginning to understand." She paused, gathering herself. "He's not the same man he was when you last saw him. None of us are the same as we were before the people we loved were taken from us. But he's still here. He's still standing. And maybe that's something worth holding on to." The silence stretched between them, long and fragile. Martha's gaze moved between Clara and Eli. The tension in her shoulders eased, slowly, like ice beginning to thaw. "You sound like her," she said quietly. "Like Sarah." She always knew how to say the thing that needed saying, even when no one wanted to hear it. Clara did not know how to respond to that. Martha turned back to Eli. "I came to see if you were still alive. I came to see if there was anything left of the man my daughter married." Her voice broke. "Is there—" Eli raised his head. His eyes were red, his jaw working around words that did not want to come. "I'm sorry." The words came out rough, scraped, raw. I should have come to see you. I should have—" He stopped, breathed, tried again. "I didn't know how to face you. Didn't know how to tell you I was still here when they weren't. Like I'd stolen something that should have been theirs." Martha crossed the distance between them. She was a small woman shorter than Clara, her frame thin beneath the black dress, but when she reached Eli, she pulled him into an embrace that seemed to hold all the weight of 3 years of silence. Eli's arms came up slowly. His hands pressed against her back, his shoulders shaking. Clara turned away. She climbed the porch steps quietly, opened the door, and slipped inside. The children were at the table, bowls of porridge in front of them, their eyes wide with questions. Miriam looked up as Clara entered. Her spoon paused halfway to her mouth. "Who is she?" Clara sat down beside her daughter and pulled the girl close. "Someone from before," she said. "Someone who needed to see that Eli was all right." "Is she angry?" Clara thought about Martha's face. The fear beneath the anger. The grief beneath the fear. "No, sweetheart, not angry. Just sad. And maybe a little bit relieved." Martha stayed for 3 days. She slept in the small bedroom Clara insisted, moving herself and the children to a pallet on the floor near the stove. It was crowded and uncomfortable, Samuel's elbows poking into Clara's ribs half the night. But she did not mind. The older woman needed rest, needed quiet, needed time to walk through the rooms where her daughter had lived and died. Clara watched her from a distance. Martha spent long hours in the garden, kneeling in the soil Clara had cleared after the storm, her hands moving through the earth as if searching for something buried there. She visited the barn, stood before the wooden box with the white dress, touched the fabric with fingers that trembled but did not break. She did not cry where anyone could see. Or if she did it in the small hours of the night, alone in the bed where her daughter had once slept. On the second day, Martha asked to see the graves. Eli led her to the small rise behind the house, where 2 wooden crosses stood weathered and gray against the sky. Clara watched them go from the kitchen window, watched them stand side by side in front of the simple markers, watched Eli's hand reach out and rest on Martha's shoulder. She did not follow. Some griefs were too sacred to witness. On the 3rd morning, Martha found Clara in the chicken coop. Clara was collecting eggs, her hands moving careful through the straw-lined boxes, the warm shells smooth against her palms. She heard the footsteps behind her and turned. Martha stood in the doorway, her black dress stark against the morning light, her face softer than it had been when she first arrived. "You're good with them." Clara straightened, an egg still cradled in her hand. "The chickens?" "The children." Martha stepped inside, her eyes moving over the hens scratching in the dirt. "I've been watching them these past 2 days. They're happy here. I can see it in the way they move. The way they look at Eli. The way they're not afraid anymore. Clara set the egg in her basket. They needed a home. He gave them one. He gave you one too. Clara's hands stilled. Martha crossed to the nesting boxes, her fingers trailing over the worn wood. Sarah would have liked you, I think. She always said this place needed children. Needed laughter to fill up all the quiet. She used to talk about the family. She wanted 3 or 4 little ones, running through the house, making noise enough to scare the chickens. Her voice caught. She never got to see it. Never got to have what she dreamed about. Martha turned to face Clara. But you're here now. You and your children. And this house, it doesn't feel so empty anymore. Clara did not know what to say. Martha reached out and took her hand. Her grip was firm despite her age, her skin rough with years of work. Take care of him, she said. Not because he can't take care of himself. Lord knows he's stubborn enough to survive anything, but because some burdens are too heavy to carry alone, because everyone deserves someone who stays. Clara squeezed her hand back. I will. Martha nodded once, sharp and decisive. Then she released Clara's hand and turned toward the door. I'll be leaving after breakfast, she said over her shoulder. Got a long ride back, and these old bones don't like sleeping on borrowed beds anymore. She walked out into the morning light, leaving Clara alone among the chickens with an ache in her chest that felt like something between grief and hope. Martha left at noon. Eli helped her mount her horse, his hand lingering on the bridle, his face turned up toward hers. You'll write this time. Martha's voice was firm, brooking no argument. I will. And you'll bring them to visit. The children. Clara. She paused. Your family. Eli's jaw tightened at the word, but he nodded. Martha reached down and touched his cheek, a brief gesture, tender in a way that seemed to cost her something. Sarah would have wanted you to be happy, she said quietly. Lily, too. They would have wanted you to keep living, not just surviving. Then she straightened in her saddle, gathered her reins, and turned her horse toward the east. Clara came to stand beside Eli as they watched her ride away, the black of her dress growing smaller and smaller against the golden grass until she disappeared over the ridge. Eli did not move for a long time. Finally, Clara reached out and took his hand. She's right, you know. He turned to look at her. His eyes were red-rimmed but dry. About what? About Sarah. About what she would have wanted. Clara squeezed his fingers. She would have wanted you to be happy. Eli's throat moved. He looked down at their joined hands, hers, small and work-roughened. His large and calloused, and something shifted in his face. I think, he said slowly, I might be getting there. That evening, after supper, Eli asked Clara to come with him to the barn. The air was cool, the sky clear. The stars just beginning to appear in the deepening blue. Clara followed him across the yard, past the chicken coop, past the well, to the barn where Penny stood, drowsing in her stall. Eli crossed to the shelf where the wooden box sat. He lifted it down, set it on a hay bale, and opened the lid. The white dress lay inside, still folded, still waiting, the blue ribbon, the lock of brown hair tied with string, and there, in Eli's hand, Sarah's wedding ring. He held it for a long moment, turning it in his fingers, watching the lamplight catch the worn gold. I've been carrying this for weeks now, he said. Ever since you gave it back, didn't know what to do with it. Couldn't bring myself to put it away. Couldn't stand to keep holding on to it. Clara stood beside him, close enough to feel the warmth of his body in the cool barn air. "Maybe it's time to let it rest," she said. "Not let go, just let it rest." Eli looked at the ring, at the box, at the small collection of things that were all he had left of his daughter, his wife, the life he had built and lost. "She was wearing this when I met her," he said quietly. "Her grandmother's ring? She used to joke that it was the only reason I proposed because I couldn't afford to buy her a better one." Clara's chest ached. "It was never about the ring," Eli continued. "It was about her. The way she laughed. The way she made everything, even this empty prairie, feel like home." He lowered the ring into the box, settling it beside the folded dress, the faded ribbon, the lock of soft brown hair. "I loved her," he said. "I'll always love her. But Martha's right. She wouldn't want me to stop living. She'd probably scold me for waiting this long." He closed the lid of the box, his hand resting on the smooth wood for a moment. Then he turned to Clara. "There's something I need to ask you." Clara's heart began to beat harder. "I know it's too soon. I know we've only known each other a few weeks, and there's no proper way to do this. And Tom Brewster will probably have something to say about it." "Eli." He stopped, his jaw working. "Ask me?" He reached into the pocket of his vest and pulled out something small. Not Sarah's ring, this was different. Simpler. A plain band of silver, worn smooth by years of handling. "This was my mother's," he said. "My father gave it to her when they married, 53 years ago. She wore it every day of her life until she passed. And then he wore it on a chain around his neck until he joined her." Clara stared at the ring in his palm. "I'm not asking you to forget James," Eli said. "I'm not asking you to pretend your past didn't happen, or that you don't still carry him with you. I'm just asking," his voice roughened, "I'm asking if you'd be willing to build something new. Here, with me." The barn was silent except for Penny's soft breathing and the distant chirp of crickets outside. Clara looked at Eli, at his weathered face, his gray eyes, the vulnerability he was offering her without reservation. She thought about James, about the life they had built together, the dreams they had shared, the future that had been stolen from them by a fever that took 3 days to destroy everything. And she thought about this, about Eli, about the children laughing in the yard, about Sunday dinners with mismatched dishes, about sitting on the porch in the evenings watching the stars appear, about home. She reached out and took the ring from his palm. It was cool against her skin, light, simple. "Yes," she said. Eli's breath caught. "Yes," she said again, stronger now. "I'll stay. I'll build. I'll—" She slipped the ring onto her finger, watching the way it caught the lamplight. "I'll marry you, Eli Mercer, if you'll have me." His face changed. The lines around his eyes softened. His mouth curved into a smile, a real smile, the kind she had never seen from him before, and he reached out and pulled her into his arms. Clara pressed her face against his chest. She could feel his heart beating, strong and steady, and she thought, "This is home. This is where I belong." Later, when the moon had risen and the stars had filled the sky, they sat together on the porch. The children were asleep inside, Miriam's arm draped over Samuel's small body, both of them breathing slow and deep. Biscuit lay at their feet, her tail giving an occasional thump against the wooden boards. Clara looked down at the ring on her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her all along. When? She asked. Eli's hand found hers in the darkness. Whenever you want. There's a preacher in town. Comes through once a month. Or we could ride to Dalton. Do it proper, in a church. I don't need proper. Clara leaned her head against his shoulder. I just need you. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel slowly overhead. She would have liked you, Eli said quietly. Sarah, Martha was right about that. You think so? I know so. He squeezed her hand. She had a way of seeing people, really seeing them, not just what they showed on the surface. She would have seen you, seen how strong you are, how much you love those children, how hard you fought to keep them safe. Clara's eyes stung. I wish I could have met her. Me too. Eli's voice was soft. But I think she sent you to me. Or maybe she just made sure I was looking in the right direction when you came walking across that prairie. Clara smiled despite the ache in her chest. That sounds like something a romantic would say. Maybe I am a romantic. Eli turned his head, pressing a kiss to her hair. Never thought I'd get a second chance. Never thought I deserved one. But here you are. Here I am. The wind stirred the grass beyond the porch, making it whisper secrets in a language Clara was beginning to understand. The crickets sang their endless song. The stars burned cold and bright above them. Clara closed her eyes and let herself rest. Tomorrow there would be work, chickens to feed, a garden to replant, a wedding to plan. There would be letters to write to Martha, fences to mend, a future to build board by board and day by day. But tonight, there was only this: peace, home, love, and the quiet certainty that she had finally, after all those miles and all that loss, found the place where she belonged, the place where she would stay. I did not write this story to teach anyone a lesson. I wrote it because I believe somewhere out there, someone is tired. Someone is wondering if they deserve to start over. Someone is standing in the middle of their own prairie, looking at the horizon, and asking whether the next step is worth taking. Clara walked 11 days, not because she was brave, but because she had no other choice. Eli stayed 3 years alone, not because he was strong, but because he did not know where else to go. And then they found each other. Not by fate, not by magic, just two worn-out people, standing in the same place at the same moment, willing to try again. Sometimes that is all it takes. If you are reading this, I want you to know something. You do not have to be strong every single day. You do not have to have all the answers. You just have to keep walking. One step, then another, then another. And if you are lucky, you will find someone willing to walk beside you. That is not weakness. That is home. This story is inspired by traditional American Western folktales and was created solely for entertainment purposes. It does not condone, encourage, or promote any form of violence or harmful behavior. All characters and events are products of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or deceased, or actual events is purely coincidental.